For almost 2 decades, anyone traveling along Chicago's Lakeshore Drive was confronted by an odd and almost unsettling view. Nestled at the junction where the iconic expressway brushes past Lake Michigan and crosses the Chicago River, sat a site that should have been one of the crown jewels of American architecture. Instead, it was little more than an enormous, gaping hole. Drivers and pedestrians alike would crane their necks, half expecting to see construction equipment bustling or a skyscraper finally rising. But there was nothing. Just a giant circular pit, stagnant water collecting at the bottom, weeds sprouting around its edges, and the occasional chain-link fence rattling in the wind. For residents of Chicago, it was more than just a hole. It was a wound to civic pride. This city has long prided itself on being the birthplace of the skyscraper and one of the great capitals of architectural innovation. To have a barren pit occupying such a valuable and visible plot of land was almost insulting to the city's identity. For visitors, it was baffling. Tour guides would often be asked, "What happened here?" The answer was long, complicated, and often embarrassing. That hole was supposed to be the foundation of the Chicago Spire, a 150-story twisting skyscraper designed by Santiago Calatrava. Had it been realized, the Spire would have been the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, second only to the Burj Khalifa globally, and an architectural marvel unlike anything else on Earth. Instead, the dream collapsed alongside the global financial markets in 2008, leaving behind not a shining tower but a deep crater. For years, that pit became shorthand for hubris, failed ambition, and the cruel realities of finance. But time has a way of rewriting stories. Today, more than 15 years later, the hole has been filled. Cranes and workers now swarm the site again, this time not to chase an unattainable fantasy, but to construct something tangible, measured, and grounded. The new project, known as 400 Lakeshore Drive, may not have the dizzying height of the Spire, but it represents something arguably more important: redemption. To understand this moment, we have to go back and trace the Spire's saga from its glittering beginnings to its spectacular collapse, and finally, to the quiet resilience of its replacement. Skyscraper rivalries in Chicago. Chicago has always been a city defined by height, its very identity etched into the jagged outline of its skyline. From the ground, the city feels like an arena where buildings compete for dominance, each generation of architects and developers pushing the boundaries of what is possible in steel and glass. The roots of this vertical ambition stretch back to 1885, when William LeBaron Jennings' home insurance building rose above the downtown streets. At just 10 stories, it would seem modest, even laughably short, to a modern observer gazing at the forest of towers that now surrounds it. Yet its use of a structural steel frame changed the course of urban history forever. No longer were cities limited by the weight of stone or brick. Suddenly, the horizon was no longer the limit, the sky was. From that moment on, Chicago styled itself as the birthplace and laboratory of the skyscraper. Architectural experimentation flourished. The neo-Gothic elegance of the Tribune Tower, crowned with flying buttresses, captured the city's growing confidence. The gleaming terracotta facade of the Wrigley Building stood proudly at the bend of the Chicago River, a symbol of commerce and creativity. The Chicago Board of Trade Building, with its bold Art Deco lines and an aluminum statue of Ceres standing atop its crown, embodied the city's economic might during the early 20th century. Each addition was not just a building, but a declaration that Chicago would not be outdone. Yet perhaps no structure symbolized this ambition more than the Sears Tower, now known as the Willis Tower. Completed in 1973, it soared to 1,451 feet, and for nearly 25 years, it held the title of the tallest building in the world. More than just a feat of engineering, the tower was a symbol of the city's dominance in the age of steel. With its bundled tube design, it represented not only strength but innovation, standing tall against the strong winds blowing off Lake Michigan. For Chicagoans, the Willis Tower was not just another office block. It was a source of civic pride, a black monolith visible for miles, an unmissable exclamation point on the skyline. But by the dawn of the 21st century, the competitive landscape had shifted. Chicago's supremacy in skyscraper innovation was being challenged on a global scale. The action was moving abroad, to cities like Dubai, Shanghai, and Kuala Lumpur, where oil wealth and rapid economic expansion were fueling construction booms. Towers like the Petronas Towers in Malaysia and the Shanghai World Financial Center smashed records and grabbed international headlines. Then came Dubai's audacious bid with the Burj Khalifa, a building so tall it seemed to mock the rest of the world. In comparison, American skyscrapers began to look tame, their ambitions blunted by more conservative financing and stricter urban regulations. Still, within Chicago itself, the spirit of competition had not died. A new rivalry was about to unfold on home turf. On one side stood Donald Trump, who was overseeing the construction of his international hotel and tower, a shimmering glass spike rising on the north bank of the river. At 1,389 feet, it would become the second tallest building in the city, a statement project for the brash New York developer who was eager to plant his flag in the Midwest. On the other side was a proposal so bold it threatened to eclipse not only Trump's tower, but even the mighty Willis Tower. The battle for dominance in Chicago's skyline was far from over. It was only just beginning. The birth of the Chicago Spire. In 2005, the Fordham Company unveiled plans for a skyscraper unlike any other. Designed by Santiago Calatrava, the Spanish architect known for his fluid, almost biological structures, the building was envisioned as a spiraling column, twisting gracefully into the sky. Each floor would rotate slightly off-center from the one below, creating the illusion that the entire tower was corkscrewing upward. It was both bold and beautiful, a sculpture in steel and glass. Originally called the Fordham Spire, the project was conceived as a mixed-use colossus featuring luxury condominiums, a five-star hotel, and a massive broadcast antenna. At 610 meters and 150 stories, it would have dwarfed everything else in the city and, indeed, the continent. In global rankings, only the Burj Khalifa in Dubai would surpass it. This was not just a building, it was a statement, a chance for Chicago to reassert itself as the world's skyscraper capital. The architectural press swooned. Renderings of the spire showed a shimmering helix rising above Lake Michigan, its twisting facade reflecting the sun like ripples on water. The design captured the imagination of the city, promising not just apartments but a symbol of aspiration. But vision alone does not build towers. Financing such a mammoth undertaking was a challenge from the start. The Fordham Company quickly struggled to secure the billions required. That is when an Irish developer, Garrett Kelleher of Shelbourne Development, stepped in. Confident and determined, Kelleher pledged to provide 100% of the equity. He bought out Fordham's interest and rebranded the project as the Chicago Spire. Kelleher streamlined the plan, removing the hotel and antenna in favor of an all-residential tower of more than 1,000 luxury units. The promise was simple. This would be the ultimate address in Chicago, a vertical palace for the wealthy. The city's planning bodies embraced the proposal. The Chicago Plan Commission, the Zoning Committee, and even the City Council gave unanimous approval. By mid-2007, construction was underway. The site was excavated, caissons driven deep into the earth, and a giant circular hole prepared for the foundation. The spire, it seemed, was finally on its way to reality. Collapse. The Great Recession hits. Even as construction crews dug deeper into the site and poured concrete for the Chicago Spire's foundations, skepticism hovered over the project. Chicago was buzzing with anticipation, but not everyone was convinced that such an audacious tower could, or should, be built. Among the loudest voices of doubt was Donald Trump, who was himself in the midst of building his own high-profile tower just a few blocks away. Never one to mince words, Trump dismissed the spire outright in the press. He scoffed that he would never want to build such a structure, never want to live in such a building, and flatly declared that any bank willing to finance it was insane. At the time, his remarks seemed like the predictable bluster of a rival developer trying to protect his own project's spotlight. Yet in hindsight, his words carried a sting of truth. By 2008, the entire world was being rattled by forces far beyond the control of any architect or developer. The global economy was plunging headfirst into disaster. The collapse of Lehman Brothers in September of that year triggered a financial chain reaction that reverberated through every corner of the market. In the United States, the housing bubble had already burst, leaving banks choking on toxic mortgage-backed securities, Credit markets froze, construction loans evaporated, and investor confidence vanished overnight. The crisis was quickly being described as the most severe economic downturn since the Great Depression of the 1930s. For the Chicago Spire, the timing could not have been worse. The project's financial lifeline was Anglo-Irish Bank, an institution that had fueled much of Ireland's own property bubble. As the Great Recession deepened, Anglo-Irish imploded under the weight of bad loans and reckless speculation, eventually requiring a massive government bailout. For Shelbourne Development, this collapse was catastrophic. Without its main lender, the company could no longer sustain progress on a tower that was projected to cost billions. Almost immediately, lawsuits began to pile up. Contractors filed claims for unpaid bills, suppliers demanded compensation for materials already delivered, and even Santiago Calatrava himself joined the list of creditors, saying he was owed millions in fees. The dazzling renderings of the twisting glass helix suddenly seemed like relics from another era, a fantasy that had been crushed under the boot of financial reality. By late 2008, construction came to a standstill. The tower that was supposed to pierce the heavens never made it past the bottom of its foundations. What remained was not a skyscraper but a scar, a massive 20-meter-deep pit in the ground, partially filled with water, guarded by chain-link fences and overrun by weeds. For Chicagoans, the Spire Hole, as it came to be known, quickly became infamous. Some saw it as a symbol of hubris, a cautionary tale about the dangers of chasing monumental dreams without securing solid ground beneath them. Others viewed it as a piece of bad luck, an unfortunate victim of circumstances beyond its control. But however it was interpreted, it was impossible to ignore. Drivers along Lakeshore Drive passed it daily. Tourists on architecture cruises saw it from the river. Journalists invoked it as a metaphor for the overconfidence that had defined the pre-crash years. Months turned into years, and years stretched into more than a decade. The hole remained, collecting rainwater, litter, and derision in equal measure. Every now and then, rumors surfaced that the spire might be revived, that some new investor might swoop in to finish what had been started, but nothing materialized. By the early 2010s, the once grand ambition had settled into the category of myth, a dream half remembered, a cautionary landmark that silently testified to a city brought low by forces beyond its control. Related Midwest steps in. For a long time, it seemed as if the story of the Chicago Spire might end there, its unfinished foundations slowly succumbing to rust and neglect. Yet cities are resilient organisms, and valuable land rarely stays dormant forever. By 2014, the long-stalled site finally caught the attention of a developer with the resources, expertise, and ambition to turn things around. That developer was Related Midwest, the Chicago arm of Related Companies, one of the most powerful real estate firms in the world. If Shelbourne Development had represented ambition unmoored from financial stability, Related was the opposite, cautious, well-capitalized, and proven in the art of managing vast urban projects. Their resume was nothing short of formidable. In New York City, Related was the driving force behind Hudson Yards, a $25 billion mega development that reshaped Manhattan's West Side with a forest of gleaming towers, a new subway extension, and the controversial vessel structure. In Los Angeles, Related spearheaded the Grand Lille, a Frank Gehry-designed cultural and residential hub. Across the Atlantic, the company had been instrumental in the redevelopment of King's Cross in London, one of the most successful urban regeneration projects of the last 2 decades. When Related acquired the Spire site, they brought with them a reputation for delivering projects that others deemed impossible. Chicagoans, long accustomed to staring at the pit with disappointment, finally had reason to hope that something new might rise there. But from the very beginning, Related Midwest made one thing absolutely clear: the Chicago Spire was dead and would not be resurrected. The decision was not simply about taste or ego, it was about economics. The forces that had doomed the Spire had not disappeared. The era of megatall skyscrapers in the United States had effectively ended, and there was little appetite, financial or cultural, to chase height records anymore. Unlike Dubai, where national prestige and limitless oil wealth could fuel a structure like the Burj Khalifa, American cities had become more pragmatic. Financing for ultra-tall, ultra-expensive towers was scarce, and the market for thousands of multi-million-dollar luxury condominiums in a single building was deeply uncertain. Instead, Related proposed something different, something more practical yet still ambitious. Their plan was not to build a monument to hubris, but to create a development that would both respect the legacy of the site and meet the actual needs of the market. The new project would fill the hole, literally and figuratively, while contributing meaningfully to the city's housing stock and public space. In a way, Related Midwest's takeover represented a turning point in the saga. Where the Spire had been about unrestrained ambition, the new plan was about redemption and balance. It was about learning from past mistakes, acknowledging economic realities, and envisioning a future that Chicago could realistically build. The 400 Lakeshore Drive proposal. In 2018, Related unveiled its new vision. Rather than a single gargantuan tower, the site would host two elegant skyscrapers. The taller would rise 335 meters, the shorter 260 meters. Both would taper gracefully, leaning back toward the city and framing the riverfront like monumental bookends. The project was designed by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, one of the most legendary architecture firms in the world. The lead architect was David Childs, who had designed One World Trade Center in New York. His final project before his passing in 2025, 400 Lakeshore Drive, would blend modern sleekness with nods to Chicago's architectural heritage. The rippling facade drew inspiration from Lake Michigan, while the distinctive Chicago window was reimagined in the glass curtain wall system. At ground level, a new park and extensions to the Riverwalk promised to reconnect the site to the public, ensuring it was not just a private enclave, but part of the city's fabric. The design was ambitious yet achievable, bold yet grounded. Political hurdles and design revisions. The road to approval was not without bumps. Alderman Brendan Reilly temporarily blocked the proposal, insisting on changes. He demanded that hotel rooms be eliminated, that the podium between the towers be reduced, and that the design be reworked to better fit neighborhood needs. Som responded with a revised plan. The South Tower was scaled down to 233 meters, while the North Tower grew slightly to 266 meters. Hundreds of variations were explored, testing everything from wind resistance to apartment layouts. By 2020, the city finally gave its approval. But once again, global events intervened. The COVID-19 pandemic brought construction to a halt, freezing progress for several years. For Chicagoans, it was déjà vu, another delay, another wait. Construction resumes. Finally, in 2024, construction restarted. The first phase focused on the taller North Tower, with 72 stories and 635 rental apartments, 20% of them designated as affordable housing. Unlike the Spire's exclusive luxury, this project promised a mix of accessibility and community benefit. But first, the infamous hole had to be dealt with. Engineers pumped out 3 million gallons of water. They installed 600,000 pounds of steel reinforcement and poured 9 million pounds of concrete in a 12-hour marathon to create a matte foundation. Old caissons from the Spire were reused where possible, saving both time and money. In a way, the Spire's ghost now supported its successor. The very bones of the failed megatall became the foundation for something new. By 2025, floors were rising steadily, with a new slab of concrete poured every 3 days and curtain walls following closely behind. A new future for the site. Unlike the Spire, 400 Lakeshore Drive is not about outdoing Dubai or Shanghai. It is about healing a wound, reconnecting the city to its riverfront, and creating homes for Chicagoans. The staggered plan means that the South Tower will only begin once the North Tower is complete and occupied, ensuring flexibility in the face of market fluctuations. First occupancy is expected in 2027. By then, the site that once embarrassed Chicago will finally be transformed into a symbol of resilience and pragmatism. What was lost and what was gained. The Chicago Spire will always linger as one of the greatest what-ifs in skyscraper history. Had it been built, it might have become as iconic as the Burj Khalifa or the Empire State Building. Its twisting form would have been instantly recognizable, a global emblem of ambition. But what Chicago gains in its place may be more valuable. Instead of an exclusive vertical palace for the ultra-wealthy, the new towers provide rental housing, affordable units, public space, and a reconnection to the city's history. They are not as tall, but they are more rooted in the real needs of the city. They reflect not just ambition, but wisdom. From scar to symbol. For nearly 2 decades, the hole at Lakeshore Drive was a painful reminder of failure. It symbolized hubris, overreach, and bad timing. But today, as steel and glass climb above the river once more, the story has changed. The site is no longer about a dream deferred, but about resilience and redemption. Chicago may never see a megatall tower dominate its skyline, but in filling the Spire's pit, the city gains something more enduring. 2 towers that integrate with the skyline, provide homes, and reconnect the urban landscape with its people. They may not be the tallest, but they are built to last. The Spire will live on as a cautionary tale of ambition outpacing reality. But 400 Lakeshore Drive will stand as proof that sometimes the best way to build is not to reach the absolute highest, but to build wisely, steadily, and for the future. And that brings us to the end of the incredible saga of the Chicago Spire. If you found this video as fascinating as we did, don't forget to hit that like and make sure you subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.